Well, we're not surprised, but still somewhat shocked. As special counsel Jack Smith has informed Trump by letter that he is the target of an investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Of course, it's all a witch hunt.
From the beginning, it's been one witch hunt and phony investigation after another.
Sure. That was just all never really happened. This comes a month after Trump was charged with mishandling those classified documents. Today, the judge in Florida is handling a pretrial conference regarding that case. Time permitting, we'll ask Royal about that as well. Let's welcome back to the air here, Royal Oakes, ABC News legal analyst out in Los Angeles. Royal, thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated. First question, when you receive a letter like this, is that an invitation to testify and or cut a deal before they get started?
Yeah, it's kind of that, plus even more. When you're the target of a grand jury investigation, you customarily do get the letter, and one purpose is to alert you that you have a right to say, hey, I'd like to give my side of the story to the grand jury, and that can be arranged. Another implication of the letter is that it's very likely that an indictment is coming down the pike within a few weeks, maybe a little bit more than a month. And so it's not a shock, as you say, in a sense that Jack Smith, who's the special prosecutor who brought the Miami charges concerning the Mar-a-Lago documents. But another part of his responsibility, according to what he got from the Department of Justice when they appointed him, was to look into whether or not anybody violated the law in trying to overturn the lawful election of Joe Biden back in 2020. And that now is what we think that Jack Smith is zeroing in on. We don't know, say, well, Donald Trump incited a riot when he gave a speech on January 6th, or is he going to say Donald Trump violated the law when he assembled groups of fake electors that would be alternatives for the Electoral College. So we don't know the details yet, but we know that Jack Smith is interested in the effect of Donald Trump's actions on the election.
Royal, the January 6th Select Committee recommended 4 charges, but Smith can ignore those, right?
Yeah, he can ignore any and all of them. Essentially, he has a complete carte blanche to decide whatever charges he wants to try to bring. Of course, he's got to convince the grand jury to vote for the indictment. But again, the betting has to do with Donald Trump's reaction to the election in terms of the so-called fake electors and also the January 6th riots.
I want to go to the January 6th riot first, because this seems really difficult to me to prove his intent, that he knew he was lying and essentially yelled fire at a crowded rally.
Yeah, and the problem the prosecutor has is, number one, Donald Trump will be able to point to the language in Trump's speech where he said, I want you to go peaceably to the Capitol. The problem Donald Trump has is that there's a lot of evidence that's piling up that he didn't do a whole lot sitting around in the White House that afternoon. People, including his daughter and his chief of staff, approached him and said, hey, we're only going to get the word to people to stand down. This is not looking good for us or for them. And allegedly, Donald Trump didn't do anything or did very little about that. So that could be part of the mix as well.
Yeah, but dereliction of duty, well, that has implications in a military setting because he sat there and watched TV for 4 hours. Again, I just don't know how you prove his intent. Like, being dumb or disconnected or out of it isn't necessarily a crime.
No, you're right. And that's something that the prosecution is going to have to cope with. And really, some people are criticizing what he's doing and saying, he's overreaching here. It's one thing to go after, the Stormy Daniels payoff, his controversial legal theory. Then there's the confidential documents, the secret stuff down in Mar-a-Lago. But for people to, as you say, climb into Donald Trump's head and prove that he actually intended to commit a crime here, that could be a tall order.
I listened to somebody, Dan Abrams, actually today, read the statutes that he thinks Jack Smith is using, and encouraging others to disrupt a public function. And then there's this phrase, aiding and giving comfort to insurrectionists. Now I guess that we have convictions for insurrection regarding January 6th. That comes into play. But again, I agree with you. I think it's a tremendous reach. I think the documents case, and we might as well use our remaining time together to talk about that. That's pretty clear to me. You had them. You didn't send them back. It seems very simple. This January 6th stuff, I think it all depends on intent and, dereliction of duty. We can hold them accountable ethically and morally, but I don't see it just seems like a heavy lift to me.
Well, I think you're right. I think probably what the prosecutor feels that they have going for them, for him, is the idea that, whereas taking a few boxes away didn't exactly put America's security at risk necessarily, whereas the invasion of the Capitol was a historic moment.
Yeah.
The prosecution has to deal with the fact that a lot of people are skeptical and saying, oh, what a coincidence that the Biden administration arranges for this special counsel, and the Biden administration is trying to knock off what they see as their strongest opponent.
Do you get this kind of a political question? You get the sense that Garland, if there wasn't a documents case, right, if there hadn't been a documents case, would never been on this January 6th angle.
It's hard to tell. I think from Merrick Garland's standpoint, he's in a tough position. He knows a lot of people, tens of millions, assume that he's a total political hack. And so he knows that he's got to be like Caesar's wife, above reproach. And yet, if he's presented evidence by his staff that, oh my gosh, there was an insurrection and we can cobble together a legal theory against Donald Trump, he'd be hard pressed to pass it up.
What will we learn regarding the judge's intentions in Florida from the hearing today?
Boy, that's a great question. This judge who's come under fire, Aileen Cannon, was appointed by Trump shortly before his term ended. She has ruled in his favor a year or so ago in a civil case. So a lot of people are saying she's not really qualified, she's biased, she was on the bench so little time. And now a big question today and in the very near future is going to be how fast-tracked is this Miami Mar-a-Lago documents case going to be? The prosecution wants the trial to be early next year. Donald Trump wants the trial to be after the election next year. Some people are saying, if he's president again, he can pardon himself and or direct his Department of Justice to dismiss the case. So you got this political stuff interfering with the legal stuff, and sometimes it's hard to know how to separate out the factors.
If he was reelected, at least we'd finally sort out that question since Nixon was around, whether a sitting president can be prosecuted. If so, what are the cutouts on that? At least we'd finally sort through that.
Well, that's right. Not only whether a sitting president may be prosecuted, but also whether a sitting president may pardon himself or herself. So, it's a lot of uncharted territory, I think, has tracked Donald Trump up until now, and probably it's going to be very similar to that into the future, especially, as you say, if he gets reelected.
Royal Oaks, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it, sir. Have a great afternoon.